We are on. Hello, Satay Finance.
Hey, Pontem team. It's great to hear from you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you on again. Last time you were a special guest in our Notify live stream, so now we have a dedicated one with you. So excited to have you on, learn more about what you're building, and yeah, share with our audience. So I know we're 1 minute in. We'll give folks a few more minutes to come in. So yeah, I'll turn back some tunes and we'll kick it off in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Great, thank you. Cool. I will invite anyone else up on Twitter if they want to come up and ask questions. Feel free. Just raise your hand or request to speak, and we'll bring you up as well. Trying to make these as interactive as possible. Great. So let's kick it off. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're building, and how people can get started using your product.
Yeah, absolutely. So to tell a little bit about the history of how Satay came to be and what it is that we're doing. So I grew up very poor and I had to find ways to maximize every dollar. So that made me very finance oriented. And I fell in love with blockchain and Web3 as the intersection of finance and technology, with technology being the best vehicle to go from 0 to 1 without capital. So I started off by building blockchain solutions for TradFi. I was working closely with a few venture capital firms before going fully in on decentralized finance. So Satay Finance is the premier yield aggregator on Aptos and future Move chains. We offer curated multi-protocol strategies that maximize your Aptos APY at the click of a button. So talk a little bit more about that. Each protocol in a DeFi ecosystem is like a puzzle piece for us to put together to maximize the opportunity for returns. So it additionally brings people together so that we can build things bigger than ourselves. So to talk a little bit about our strategies, we currently offer curated investment strategies that maximize APY, with our flagship strategy being leverage liquid staking. Right now, you can earn 7% staking rewards on Tortuga, but we're actually able to leverage Aries markets as well in order to boost those emission rewards to 19 to 20%. So in the future, we're going to be doing things to make the Move language more accessible and bring Satay more opportunities. However, at launch, we are an aggregator, so we're helping you maximize your investments in the ecosystem.
Nice. So it's, as I understand it, it's almost like a way to put together all the building blocks or the Lego blocks of DeFi in a way that it's managed. So other people are doing it. It could be you, it could be others that are coming up with these strategies, and then opening up those for the masses so that they don't have to manually go in and, for example, as you were saying, use Tortuga plus Aries in order to maximize yield on liquid staking. I imagine there it's like using the liquid staking derivative as collateral and then passing that through again to take out more leverage on the liquid staking derivative, given that that should sustain a 1-to-1 with Aptos, so it shouldn't go down in value, and then you essentially loop it through a number of times to get that 20%. Now that people could do that manually, but with Satay, they could just essentially deposit once into a vault, and then behind the scenes, y'all are doing Satay Finance is doing the uh, essential logic to create that strategy.
Yeah, exactly. See, we're really passionate about DeFi and the Aptos ecosystem, so we're very well connected and aware of all of the different puzzle pieces. However, for new investors, that's not always the case. So as you mentioned, it can be complicated in order to put strategies together in order to maximize your yield. But past that, it's cumbersome to keep track of, right? Each protocol that you add, that's a different front end that you need to be consistently checking to make sure that your yield strategies are up to date and are doing the best. We take care of that for you. We offer two different products at Satay Finance. We have strategies and vaults. So our strategies are through the form of structured products, which you can invest in a single strategy. So for example, you can invest directly into leveraged liquid staking. You can invest directly into liquid staking plus LP farming, or directly into borrow lend optimization. However, if you are interested in having a less active role and just passively parking your money, you're able to do that through Satay Vaults, which automatically allocate funds across the different strategies which we offer in order to maximize APY. And currently, the vaults are, or rather, the strategies and vault strategies are being created by the Satay team. So we're working very closely with our partners. We're doing due diligence on every protocol which is brought into Satay strategies. All of them have additionally been audited to ensure maximum safety for investors. And in the future, as we build out the Satay DAO, the community is actually going to have a more active role in being able to create, propose, and approve future strategies which will be offered through the Satay Finance protocol.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I believe the first incarnation of this was Yearn Finance on Ethereum, created by Andre. I remember the story that he told was essentially he was just yield farming himself. He was like mining. I think it was like during DeFi summer, just mining all these emission rewards. And he's like, why don't I just make contracts that do this for me? And then he like productized it. Um, but I think over time, this has definitely evolved into more complex DeFi strategies than just simple farming of emission rewards. I think, especially for other protocols, it's useful to gain user adoption through these easy to use tools, essentially composing together all these DeFi protocols. So yeah, kind of curious to hear your view for where this product is going into the future.
Absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, it's incredible to create value not only financially for investors, but to also uh, create value for their time, making these strategies much simpler and making it easier to enter. One thing that we also love about being an aggregator is that we bring ecosystem members together into one place. So especially for early within the Aptos launch, it's important for us to be working together as an ecosystem, which is something that we've noticed about Aptos. That I don't think that there's ever been a chain in which the early protocols are working so closely together, in which the community, is so actively learning together, that we're bounded by, the Move language. We're bounded by being at the cutting edge of smart contract security, and it's also beginning to work together. So we plan to extend that gesture to future chains as well. So we're starting on Aptos, getting maximizing APY for investors, bringing our Move community together. We're excited to be expanding to SWI in the future as that chain comes to launch. We've already laid out vault architecture for the SWI chain, so already making some strides to prepare for that launch when that day comes. However, in the future, we're also keen on doing things that are going to support the Move community. We want Move to be the standard of smart contract security, because in the past year, we've seen nearly $3 billion in smart contract hacks. That's primarily with languages such as Solidity, which are the standard because they've had a lot of time to mature. They have extensive documentation and tooling, and they have robust ecosystems, which they're a part of. So we want to make steps and strides in order to make the Move language more accessible to users, to developers, and to projects. And in the future, looking at other chains in which we're able to launch our yield aggregator on, which is going to be able to provide much more robust yield and user base and liquidity, so that our protocol is able to almost have a complementary ecosystem to launch in and aggregate as the Aptos ecosystem matures, which will also allow us to push the Move language forward. So I'm excited to share more about that at some point in the future. But for the moment, the core of what we are doing is these structured products and vaults, which are going to be on the investor side, maximizing their APY, making it simple to effectively, efficiently invest in the Aptos ecosystem, and for protocols, bringing people together and doing all that we can to support new entrants into the Aptos ecosystem, so that we're able to really make this community flourish. What's great about being a yield aggregator, and one thing that we learned from Urine, is that yield aggregators sit in a very precious place in the DeFi ecosystem, being connected across DeFi primitives with lots of awesome protocols. And so we're really excited to be leveraging those relationships to build things bigger than ourselves. So this is the cornerstone that we're building, an aggregator. We're excited to be building on top of that in the future, and more information will be coming shortly.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely see that vision coming to life. It's in the future. I don't think people need to worry about which L1 infrastructure they're on. Hopefully, as the Move runtime becomes more prevalent across other chains, applications like Liquidswap, applications like Satay can more easily deploy. Liquidity also doesn't need to be siloed, as layer zero, wormhole, seller, all these bridges get a Lindy effect and people become a little bit more comfortable using them. I think we're definitely going to see the abstraction of the infrastructure for users, and then as even as products like wallets get better, where they can support EVM and Move chains, I can imagine a user just coming, having some Ethereum or even some Bitcoin, and then easily being able to deposit it into a vault, potentially having to click a bunch of times to confirm transactions across chains. But that's essentially having it all be done in one user experience, as opposed to having to think about like, oh, am I in the right chain? Am I using the right wallet? Where is my assets after all these bridges? How much do I have to wait? All of this right now is terrible user experience, as the liquidity and the infrastructure is very fragmented. But I think through small steps, as we're doing, day by day, slowly, we'll improve the user experience. And I think probably in the next, hopefully within 5 years, users won't even have to think about which layer one infrastructure they're using.
Absolutely. It's exciting to and think about where the future of Web3 is going, and that's actually happening right now. That one of the silver linings, I think, of bear markets is that it provides an opportunity for builders to focus on the infrastructure side of things, making better experiences for users and kind of getting things in place for the next bull cycle. Whereas in bull, everyone is, focused on DeFi, reaping the rewards of what has been built. It's in bear markets that, those infrastructures get built and put in place.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because if we really want to support billions of users as Aptos and Sui are, making claims, the infrastructure isn't really there yet. Even for them individually, like 100,000 transactions per second. If we're doing things like social apps, for example, where like each like could be a transaction. If everybody's trading, if you're doing high frequency trading, that's going to take up a lot of bandwidth, and I don't think any one L1 could potentially get there. Maybe even through rollups, I guess. You might leave some limits or thresholds that are kind of hard to to go through, and that's also likely why there is like several cloud infrastructure providers and even applications today have redundancy in them in case one of them goes down or one of them has starts to throttle performance. I think similarly we'll see the architecture for decentralized apps also needing to be more decentralized or cut across different L1. So if you really are going to onboard billions of people onto this, at least as we see it right now, the infrastructure just like physically can't do it. So we need to think of ways to make it easier. I think the main issues is that people want Ethereum and Bitcoin, and most of the activity that's going on is with Ethereum and Bitcoin, and people don't trust yet the wrap receipts or derivatives of them on the other chains. As we've seen, even just last year, there was a few very large hacks with like Nomad, for example, and Wormhole. Just those two, I think, were like $600 million. So I think people generally just need to have a little bit more trust, and obviously trust needs to be earned, not just come out of nowhere. Um, but once that happens, and once we can start distributing the I guess workload, the bandwidth across these different chains, I think we'll be able to manage more users at hopefully relatively low cost and with better user experience. Um, but it's hard, and we'll get there. It really does. I know it's a trope to say that this is like early 60s or 70s or 80s internet, but it really kind of does feel like that. Maybe I guess we probably have gone through the 90s now with like all the bubbles that we've seen. Um, but people just need to keep building. The technology will get there eventually, and it'll become a lot more useful. I think what I'm excited about is when people start to think of other assets that can be traded, not just ETH, Bitcoin, all these magic internet monies, and we start to move into real world assets. So real estate, REITs, even like art. We can start to put this on chain stocks. I know there's probably going to be a lot of regulatory hurdles to get to this, but imagine being able to trade 24/7 any market, having those markets be composable with each other, being able to build smart contract logic, having that be open for people to build applications like yield aggregators on like pretty much any financial primitive that exists out there. I think that's hopefully the future we're going towards. That's gonna open up access to quote unquote finance for the rest of the world. But it seems super far away. But I think just putting one foot in front of the other, we'll get there.
Absolutely. And one foot in front of the others. What we've seen a few things that have been really exciting personally for me is looking at Wormhole's progress with, I think they just recently launched an L1 on Cosmos, which is interoperable at levels which we've never seen before. Additionally, I think it's really cool what USDC is doing with their stablecoin, doing it in such a way that is very regulatory compliant and paving the way for future adoption of Web3. One question that often weighs on me that I try to think of the answer to is how you balance centralization and decentralization in Web3, with centralization being almost a necessity in order to onboard the next generation of Web3 users to some degree, because things need to have a little bit more regulation and there need to be more rails set in place, if you will, in order to onboard the general user into Web3. So I'm really curious what things are going to look like down that respect for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of hard because if as long as it doesn't limit innovation or the actual capabilities of this, because if we start to put on a lot of the same hurdles that exist for using banking today, I think we're definitely going to make it look a lot like what it looks like today. Like, for example, it's really hard for someone in an emerging economy or developing country to get access to a bank account, to get access to savings, to get access to the U.S. dollar, for example, and even just stable coins. I think that's the first step. I think that's the glimpse that lets me understand how this could look like in the future. The fact that through USDC, through Tether, even though Tether could doubtful of whether their reserves are actually all there and what they say they are, but let's take USDC as a good example. Um, you know, Audited using reputable banks where they're storing cash or cash equivalent reserves, and anybody in the world now has access to the U.S. dollar without onerous fees, without any form of, I guess the intermediary there is USDC, and it is centralized, but you should have the regulation in place locally already to make sure that the cash or what they say they have for cash equivalents are there, and now you're putting it on blockchain rails, and it is cross chain, multi chain. USDC exists in most major L1s, and now everybody can have access to the U.S. dollar. I think that's super powerful when you compare it to pretty much any other currency, which in the last few years has gone through a lot of inflation. Imagine being in Argentina, for example, and not having access to the U.S. dollar. A lot of people do trust Bitcoin more now than their local currency, even if it goes down in value. At least it has some chance of going up in value as opposed to being deflated. So the fact that now we have USDC, which we should have some regulation around how we audit it and make sure that the dollar reserves are there. I think that's a good framework for other types of assets. That to your point, we need some form of centralization, but the centralization should be at the on and off ramps where we need to make sure that whatever exists in the physical world, like dollars in vaults, or I guess in bank accounts or whatever systems are being used at banks, versus this new digital economy or digital rails. I think that's where the regulation should be, and hopefully, it's not too onerous where we start to lock out the people that need it the most, like those in emerging economies that need access to like U.S. grade, financial products like the U.S. dollar. So I think that's super encouraging for me. I think the stable coin is probably the best example of what this whole ecosystem could look like in the future. And that's a huge step forward, and it is kind of centralized, but yeah, I think it kind of needs to be for us to trust that the real dollars are there until there's like native, I guess, until there's native bonds and cash equivalents, like I guess CBDCs. But until then, we do need some, or even that I guess will be centralized by the corresponding governments. Um,
I really like that perspective of having the centralization being at the on and off points, which is going to be kind of like a way to hold the hand of the consumer to make sure that they're getting in and out smoothly. Whereas internally, what excites me about the Web3 world is that code is law. It is smart contracts. That, for example, with Web2 and traditional companies, you are bound by the terms of service. And let's be real, no one reads those like 20 plus pages of legalese and deep in-depth jargon that essentially says we, the central authority, can do whatever we want, and you, the consumer, are at our whim. That's not the case in Web3, in which you are governed by smart contracts. And we've seen that be, a good thing in the form of consumers and users, investors having a lot more dignity in the equation. However, we've also seen a few problems with it, as you mentioned, with hacks, where that is, it's just what happens when code is law. So it's really exciting to see auditing becoming the standard for dApps that are built, as well as for security to be being pioneered with new languages by the Aptos and Sui teams. I think the security is a fundamental thing that needs to be addressed in order to onboard that next user or next wave of users. And as you mentioned, my favorite part about Web3 is that it makes the world more accessible. That I myself have experienced the feeling of being completely alienated from, the strong economy and from financial means. And so for the US dollar and for global financial markets to be more accessible to people through the on ramp of Web3 is truly a beautiful thing to me. And recently we've been speaking to, of course, a lot of teams in building Satay Finance, and we've spoken with people all over the world. We regularly speak with people in Vietnam and Singapore and Dubai, the UK, all over the world. We're talking to teams, and you know I've seen a lot of people moving to Dubai recently for crypto, which is really interesting to me, seeing kind of like the migration of developers. At early stages, everyone, of course, was out in SF. Then we started to see Miami and Texas pop up as crypto hubs. But lately, been seeing a lot of people traveling, all over the world to different places, different cities to build together.
Yeah, I think it really does get rid of boundaries. I mean, the internet itself doesn't have any boundaries. Um, I think what it's interesting is that we've created a way to trustlessly interact with each other on the internet, on these digital mediums. That's what Bitcoin unlocked. That's what Ethereum built on top of. That's what Aptos Sui are building on top of. But yeah, we still need to have some trust in the physical world, unless and like that connection between the physical and digital world, I think, is where we still need some form of gatekeeper, trusted oracles to make to make. But maybe once things become digitally native, as more things move onto the internet, as we start to get rid of these boundaries that exist in the physical world, um, more of this, yeah, more of this technology will become more accessible and it becomes a little bit more trustless. And yeah, to your point about contracts being law, um, it's sort of interesting because yes, the smart contracts themselves will execute, and then within the constraints, or I guess the jurisdiction of the internet or the blockchain, that gets executed, and there's no going back. However, I think we still need to have a physical world, or I guess law and order, because if someone does steal money from these contracts, there should be jurisdictions in the real world that can pursue them and hopefully return back those funds for users. One interesting one that is somewhat philosophical but came to light very recently is Avi, who market manipulated the Mango token in order to essentially drain funds from the Mango protocol. Now they did return, and users were made whole, and he only got away with part of what the treasury of the Mango protocol had. However, I believe he was recently arrested in Puerto Rico for market manipulation. So even though code is law, and he worked within the constraints of that smart contract, there's still really real laws under the physical jurisdictions which he lives under, which was Puerto Rico. And it looks like the authorities were able to come after him, and potentially the money that he quote unquote made from this very profitable trading strategy with no risk might be returned back to individual holders. So um, yeah, even though this is it's definitely a new paradigm, and within the construct of that paradigm, the blockchain, things get done and get executed. I think we still need some form of law and order, I guess, hopefully in the real world, so that users still have some trust of what's being done, that they can still be protected.
For sure. One thing that I would love to see in Web3 that I'm curious about, its feasibility of making this happen is safety nets for consumers that in traditional finance and in Web2, let's say you send a transaction, to a wrong account with your bank, right? You can call your bank, you can have that sorted out internally by the centralized entity. Additionally, let's say you buy a product with cash, doesn't come, you can charge that back through your bank, through your credit card, through one of these centralized entities. I think that the problem of mishandling or mismanaging funds by user error is even more prevalent in Web3, in which things are more complicated. There's not as many, rails or entities or things which are holding the hand of the user to protect them. It really is, in a sense, a wild west in which you're out there on your own. You need to make good decisions about, what smart contracts you put your funds into. You need to be very, very careful about, when you are transferring funds between wallets or to different chains, etc. One solution that we have found pop up is centralized exchanges. Like, to give them credit where credit is due, I think it's incredible to have a solution that is, not just an on and off ramp, but additionally a wallet and I believe some exchanges having the possibility of staking assets on the exchange front end. So that is a huge, not only a huge number of functionalities that we see in one single location, but then additionally, there being more internal security because you don't need to worry about, your wallet address when your funds are on the exchange. Everything is there, and the user experience is set up in such a way that it is difficult for your funds to quote disappear in the same way that it's possible for them to do if you have it in your own wallet or if you're moving it between wallets and different protocols within DeFi. So, one question that we've been thinking about on our side is how do we bridge these experiences together? That is, how can we learn from what centralized exchanges are doing and bring that into DeFi? Because, of course, centralized institutions, especially exchanges, come with their own host of problems. What we've seen a lot recently is very predatory terms of services in which users don't actually own their own money, right? We saw this a long time ago with GameStop and Robinhood. When it came to light that it's not actually you who owns the shares which you buy, they're actually owned by Robinhood, which then you have the right typically to execute on them how you see fit. So that is not as much of an issue in DeFi, right? We haven't seen, DEX misuse of customer funds in the past. However, for the average user, and especially, I believe, for the next wave of users which will be onboarded, which inherently are not as technically savvy as existing users and are going to be significantly more concerned about issues such as, their funds disappearing into hyperspace and making sure that, everything is happening smoothly for them. How can we give them the best experience? How can we build something that is attractive to them? Because I think that convenience for the average person is always going to trump security. And so until we are able, I don't think that we should be waiting on legislation in order to fix the issues which we are seeing with centralized institutions. We need to beat them. We need to do what they do better in a decentralized manner, which is going to make things more accessible for the user. One thing that I find really exciting, down this direction is the prevalence of on-ramps popping up. There's a few on-ramps which we've spoken to that are currently working on Aptos support and functionality, which will be able to integrate onto our front end to make our protocol more accessible to people without the need to go to a centralized exchange in order to get those assets. So we're really excited, thinking about the future and how we're able to do things better.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a trade-off once you start to uh, include people into the equation. I think we can build completely trustless systems without people, and that's one end of the spectrum. You can look at Bitcoin, for example, where there is people, there are miners, there's users. However, the system is set up in a way where nobody has to trust each other in any way. The miners don't have to trust the users. The users don't have to trust the miners to continue mining. The miners, each one has their own individual incentives, which are actually kind of pitted against each other. Uh, for example, users might want the price of Bitcoin to be really low, um, just so they can buy more. The miners might want the price of Bitcoin to be up or higher than the electricity that they're expending, just so that they can make a profit. But together in the system, miners will just keep mining as long as users keep using transactions and paying for fees. And the system just works trustlessly, flawlessly, so far without any major hiccups or any major hacks. Um, but once we start to integrate people into the equation, even into these decentralized protocols, you start to it stops becoming trustless because the code itself can be trustless. As we were saying earlier, you can code things in, and those can be inspected by everybody. Everybody knows those are the rules that it's going to get executed on. It's just a program. Um, but something like, for example, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't include humans in the equation. I think humans are a part of this. But when we start to look at things like DAOs, for example, that are making decisions together, there's still people behind, those addresses that are voting, those tokens that are voting. One example could be like insurance, where now there's insurance protocols where, for example, if there's a hack or there's any form of potentially, like you were saying, it could be used for things like chargebacks or fraudulent purchases. But then you still need people to come together and say like, yes, this is something that's covered, this is something that's not covered, and then are those people corruptible? Those are questions that exist even today, and something that we might not ever be able to fix, but at least now we have tools that allow us to do this, without borders, allow us to do it, I guess, online as well, so it doesn't have to be a physical event. But yeah, once you start to introduce people into the equation, things start to get a little bit more muddled or muddied. And I think this thing is just a tool, and it's a tool that's going to help us, work trustlessly between each other. But we still probably need to trust each other as people, I guess, until robots themselves start making decisions for us. But yeah, the centralized exchanges is an interesting one because to the point about including people, we are including an organization full of people that now we have to trust. And yeah, unfortunately, when you deposit your coins, even though there's a lot of convenience and not to abstract away entirely, all the user experience of crypto, of managing your own keys, of having to, yeah, essentially custody your own assets, you are now trusting people to custody those assets for you. And, they could be doing fraudulent activity, like as we have seen FTX and extending credit to Alameda through customer funds that was against their terms of service, which is part of the reason which they're now in trouble for. And unfortunately, people, you know, hopefully they didn't lose some of that money can be given back to those users. But yeah, that was a a function of us having to trust people to do this for us. Um, However, I think there's a better way where we can uh, use these tools and still have some trust in people. So, for example, multi-sigs. So exchanges have great user experience, and they do enable, as you were saying, a lot of services like staking, without having to manage your own key. But what if it wasn't fully custodial? What if you only gave them, one of n, just to make it easier for you to recover your keys, for example, if you lost them, to log in with one device which has a key, and then they custody another one in order to access your account, but they never fully have 100% control of your account. Um, so I think there's ways to use, the primitives, the crypto primitives that allow us to self custody, to have full control of our assets in a way that is different, where we can still have some of these trusted intermediaries play a role, give services like custody. I think some people definitely want that, or maybe even like it shouldn't be that much overhead when you give them your keys, that they put it into their own address and you can watch it and see that they're not doing anything weird with it. I think that could also be part of the paradigm shift. So yeah, I mean, generally I think this technology definitely enables a lot of things, and we probably still need trust in people. We just need to figure out how to use it best in the way that keeps people honest and prevents things like FTX happening again.
Mm. Yeah, as we speak about this, it draws my mind to my favorite show of all time. It's called Money Heist, La Casa de Papel. So in it, the plot is that you have this genius who's laid out a perfect plan. He has contingencies for every possible thing that could happen, and knows exactly what needs to happen. Everything's fleshed out. However, what this perfect plan does not account for is human nature, that people naturally make mistakes and things go wrong. So in the very first episode, you see very exciting, um, it's truly thrilling, seeing this plan getting kicked off, and then very quickly, things going wrong, and what happens from there. But I think that these questions which we pose, it's incredible that we as a DeFi ecosystem of builders are actively thinking about these questions and how we can make things better. That I think at the core, what I love about cryptocurrency is that it is the crucible for blockchain innovation. And I think that the reason for that is its financial tie. That although the intrinsic value of tokens and of cryptocurrency is information, it's blockchain, that having a financial tie, it gives an incentive for innovation, that it drives us to do things better and drives us to create better systems, because especially in markets like this, it's like the cleaning of a slate in which a lot of funds are being exited, there's not as many funds coming in, the painting is losing color of sorts. However, that gives an opportunity for the painters to flesh out, beautiful new foundations, doing things a different way that is going to provide even more value, such that when users come back, they're going to be attracted to this new value add, which has been created. And we see that over the course of many cycles and many years of innovation, that now we have incredible things happening, such as zero knowledge proofs. We have lots of new infrastructure being built, which allows communication between blockchains and your seamless transferring of assets, of messages. We see from even within the DeFi communities themselves building new infrastructure and architecture, which will provide security to users, that even being adopted on more centralized levels now really is, although it might not be the brightest time of the Web3 space, these, deep downtrodden markets, almost the most exciting, because this is where the most innovation is happening for when those times get better, to allow everyone to benefit even more, than they could right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely think that's the direction we're going. I don't know whether to feel excited or kind of scared about it. I guess both. Um, but yeah, I think we're starting to trust technology more and more with our decisions, and it's gonna happen first with somewhat easy decisions like driving, right? Like pretty soon, I mean, I think recently the beta for full self-driving from Tesla was released, and that's going to be the first step. It's like, okay, now we no longer have to drive, whereas that was an activity in, a lot of people's jobs, honestly, right? Like Uber drivers, truck drivers. Um, and we're just now outsourcing that to robots. Like, how soon until it's coding, for example, or like more abstract level thinking, like governing a country? I think there's probably going to be a tipping point at some point in our maybe in our lifetimes where we just start to trust decisions more to these programs or machines. Um, I think what's interesting is that all AI at least is just based on inputs like past inputs. So ChatGPT, for example, you're just feeding in the internet, and it comes up with these, and it doesn't have the ability to come up with entirely new things out of nowhere. Although I guess you could make the argument too that humans just use old information to come up with new information. um, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know if that scares me or it just kind of like excites me, but I think it's inevitable. Like I think there's the singularity, the point where AI takes over or surpasses humans. We're probably past the tipping point. Like I think we're probably gonna get there pretty soon.
Oh, for sure. I think I'm in that same boat as you, where it's like looking into Pandora's box. There's so much possibility beyond what we can even imagine that we are looking at. And it's almost like a roller coaster that is entering, going up into this box, what it feels like that we've been surrounded by technology, right? We've seen the adoption and use cases and ingraining of things like the internet, phones, laptops into our society. So we've seen this wave coming, but I think like we're just now beginning to be hit by it. As you mentioned, like Chat GPT, that is revolutionary, right? Like I know people who are using this for, assistance within academics even, that you can talk to this bot about, the prompt that you have for your paper. It can write out essays. Of course, it's at like a high school, maybe middle school level of writing right now, which isn't great, but that is nonetheless freaking crazy. And even so, you can have a conversation with this bot about the prompt. You can ask it anything. It knows everything. And, it can really complement human thinking for what we're doing. It's been able to spit out, some bits of code as well, making the jobs easier for developers. I think what was the funniest part about this has been initially, a lot of outcry was coming from like the art community because AI posed, being able to create art with inputs does, I guess, has a negative impact on job security for artists. Of course, additionally, for some people, let's say like you hate drawing hands, now the AI can supplement, that bit of art that you don't necessarily like to do, so you can focus on the parts that you do love to do. But it's really interesting to see AI now, in theory, to some degree, threatening the job security of tech in addition. So I think things like Dolly, ChatGPT have come such a long way, and it's incredible. Even with like the Tesla beta, to think that this is here, it's happening now. It's no longer, oh, in the future. I think we'll be able to talk with AI, and it's going to be able to like do things like code. It's going to be able to write essays. Like, no, that's happening now. So it blows my mind to think about what things will even look like in the future. One thing I'm also really excited about for the future is the metaverse. I know that's been something that has, it originally had a lot of hype going behind it, and then people were kind of like, okay, what's the point of this? It lost. People got kind of disillusioned with the metaverse, but I myself am still a pretty big proponent and very excited about it. However, I think that the public sentiment is generally very correct that at the moment metaverse is kind of like not necessarily a fever dream, but it's something that we are on the precipice of. We're still, or maybe we're still a little bit off away from the precipice of the metaverse. That historically we've seen cool, quote unquote metaverses in the form of online games like Second Life. The Fortnite, they were having virtual concerts, which people were able to come to. That's a metaverse of sorts, kind of real world, breaking down barriers to bring real world events and things and happenings and interactions into this digital space in which you're able to communicate, you're able to move information instantly. So whether that be the movement of a model in terms of location where you were based, whether that be the communication of things like words to people or even assets through infrastructure that has been built in those metaverses. Those are really cool use cases, and I think provided some insight into what that future is going to be looking like. However, I think generally the technology is just not there yet. Right now, it's expensive in order to enter VR. I've had the pleasure of getting to try VR headsets in games. So incredibly fun, so cool. However, nonetheless, the headset is pretty cumbersome. It's not the greatest experience. Moving is kind of difficult in the space. You're very confined to like a square, which you're able to move around in. And in order to move your character, often you need to use like a controller. There's not like full movement, just metaverse space. The technology, as graphics cards continue to get better and technology continues to get better, it's been exciting seeing more immersive environments and more powerful processing. However, I truly think that at least for myself, I would expect the metaverse to become something bigger in like 3 to 5 years once the technology has been able to continue growing to the extent to which, let's say, we'd be able to model real world environments with in-depth physics in this virtual environment. Suddenly that can become a better place for testing anything that we would typically test in the real world, whether that be for example, weapons testing. We can do it in a way that is significantly safer, is not going to have the same environmental impact as ones in the past have had. Being able to model solutions, let's say, um, anything regarding physics in which you would need to build something very big, and especially things in which you need to destroy something that is very big, that cuts down costs and makes things happen more quickly. We're already exploring parallelism in graphics cards and fleshing that out. So being able to model lots of different events with slight differences simultaneously, I think can be huge from the testing perspective. One other really fun and exciting use case would be with, for example, testing things with nuclear fusion. That I think we recently just had our first breakthrough in which there is a net energy gain, which is absolutely massive for clean energy, for creating more accessible energy that's going to be able to take care of people. But anyway, I think, as I mentioned, I think that the real case for the metaverse technology is still a little bit out there, but it's incredibly exciting to think of, what the future is going to look like. Because I think that if we're able to get some insight into what the future might look like, we're able to better position ourselves for that future.
Yeah, definitely. All these are coming together. I was just working out in the metaverse just yesterday.
No
It's
way.
actually pretty good.
What was that like?
It's like a boxing type thing. You put on the headset. Obviously, maybe the headset even makes it harder because it's like this heavy thing on your head and you're getting sweaty. But boxing is actually a pretty good use case. I don't know how maybe golfing might be another one. You might need like a stick or something, but golfing when you're punching the air, it's actually more effort because you have to decelerate versus like when you're punching a punching bag, you just like let go, and so
Mm.
in 20 minutes in that thing, you're like sweating profusely. So definitely see that as a use case, like working out, definitely more engaging and fun. It's almost I guess I used to play Guitar Hero It's kind of similar. You're just like, going along to music, trying to hit these things. Lightsaber is another popular one. Yeah, I would argue the metaverse is here. Even like Twitter, Discord right now, we're talking to over 100 people in just live, on the internet. That previously wasn't a thing that happened. It's just like the fidelity of it is going to get better. Where the devices that allow us to do this are going to get better. Cell phones at one point in time were like these giant things, and similarly, these headsets are giant things, but the technology is just going to get better where it's going to be a form factor that's easy to put on your head. And then, people will go onto Twitter and their avatar being a frog or being a monkey, they're just going to be sitting in an audience, kind of like watching us, listening to us. Our own facial expressions are going to be also, mirrored in this metaverse. If you go on YouTube, there's an alien character that's like looking at my looking at my lips, and I guess not full facial expressions, but we're gonna get there, and then we're gonna become these like digital avatars of ourselves that go in, and that's essentially what we've been envisioning for a really long time, and it's just slowly happening, and yeah, I think it might be like one or two generations where they'll look back and kind of like start stop to see a difference between the physical and digital world just because they're both such high fidelity. I think the scary part again is like when you start to introduce these, like when you're interacting with people or things in the metaverse, like how do you know for sure that it's like a physical person or thing as opposed to like a robot that passes the Turing test? And like does it even matter at that point? And then if it doesn't matter, should these robots start to get, like human rights, quote unquote? Um,
I,
but yeah, I think we'll get
I think that's probably that's my favorite conspiracy or kind of thought with regard to potential negative issues which come from metaverses, the concept of us interacting with robots. Like, for example, I hear a lot about that already happening with websites such as Reddit, such as Twitter. It's like, how do you know that you are interacting with a person and not with the bot that has been trained? And as AI and as technology progresses and gets stronger, I think it's going to be even more difficult in order to determine whether or not you are speaking to a human or a robot. And what are the implications of that, down a metaverse, right? What if you're able to determine what is socially acceptable, what are social norms, and almost sort of inception on people with these robots, right? Let's say most people in this metaverse are wearing like a certain brand. Maybe they're saying a certain lingo. Maybe they all go to a certain restaurant or a club at night. How is that going to influence real humans? And is there an avenue, is there a world in which people use this phenomenon of being able to socially affect others for harm?
Yeah, that's true. Hopefully, some metaverse laws apply here to robots as well, and they can go to metaverse jail. No, it's definitely
Metaverse
yeah,
jail.
it's definitely a scary thought. But it's inevitable. The singularity's here. Aliens are probably all around us as we speak. But with that, I know we're running on time. Any last thoughts? Any last comments? Any takeaways you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I want to shout out everyone who's in the audience right now, being active members of the Web3 space in such a difficult time as this is commendable. That y'all are truly committed. It's really exciting to have an opportunity to get to share thoughts with you, share what we're building with you. Us at Satay Finance, we recently got our audit back from Halborn, so we're making adjustments to our code and we'll be launching on mainnet shortly. We're really excited to be serving you all. And I also want to shout out Alejo and the Pontem team for being so incredible in this space, doing so much for the Move language, for the Aptos community, and for providing opportunities for protocols like us, like Satay, to come on here and get to interact with you all. So thank you, Alejo.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Let's have you on here again soon. Once your protocol's live, we'll do a live demo show people how to use it, get them on board. Also, thank you, yeah, to everyone in the audience. I'm extremely honestly surprised there's still so many of you out there doing this bear market. It's like over 100 people live, and everyone's still watching. Just goes to show, just got to do this every week, and more people will come up. Everyone, I guess, likes to hear us talking, so people just want to know what's going on. So